The Galactic Senate Chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its crystalline walls reaching toward a dome that displayed the swirling dance of distant stars. Representatives from 800 civilizations filled the vast space, each delegation occupying sectors designed for their unique physiologies. The Zephyrian cloud beings drifted in their containment fields, while the silicon-based Korthak delegates sat motionless as living statues. Aquatic delphinians swam through their transparent tubes that wound throughout the chamber like arteries of blue light. Ambassador Vex, 9 of the Triangulum Collective, adjusted his ceremonial robes and approached the central podium. His species had evolved on a world of perpetual twilight, leaving them with large, luminous eyes that could detect the slightest emotional fluctuation in other beings. Today, those eyes registered something unprecedented in the chamber's energy patterns. "Fellow delegates," Vex 9 began, his translator converting his harmonic speech into 800 different languages simultaneously. "We gather for the 700th annual census of galactic civilizations. As tradition demands, each world will confirm their representative status and population metrics." The ritual had remained unchanged for millennia. World by world, species by species, they would stand and declare their numbers, their achievements, their contributions to the galactic community. It was a ceremony of unity, of shared purpose among the stars. The Altarian delegate, a being of pure crystalline energy, pulsed with pride as it announced the completion of their newest Dyson sphere. The crowd murmured appreciation. The insectoid hive queens of Kepler 442b clicked their approval as they reported their successful terraforming of 3 new worlds. On and on it went. A symphony of galactic achievement. But as the roll call progressed through the Outer Rim territories, a strange pattern began to emerge. Ambassador Zara Keth of the Vegan Intelligence Networks, whose cybernetic implants processed data at quantum speeds, was the first to notice the anomaly. Her artificial consciousness flagged an impossible gap in the records. "Honored speaker," she interrupted, her voice cutting through the ceremonial atmosphere like a plasma blade. "There appears to be an error in our census data." The chamber fell silent. In 700 years of galactic Senate meetings, no one had ever interrupted the sacred roll call. Vex 9's luminous eyes dimmed with confusion. "Please elaborate." "Ambassador." Zara Keth's holographic display materialized above the central podium, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light represented member civilizations, connected by trade routes and communication networks that pulsed with constant activity. But there, in what the galactic community called the backwater spiral, was a notable gap. "According to our records, every habitable world in the galaxy has a representative in this chamber," she said, her mechanical voice carrying across the vast space. "Every world, except one." The display zoomed in on an unremarkable yellow star with 9 planets. The 3rd planet glowed blue and green, clearly capable of supporting life. But unlike every other inhabited world in the database, this one showed no diplomatic contact, no representative, no acknowledgement of the galactic community whatsoever. "Sol 3, Zara Keth announced. Also known by its local designation as Earth. A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. The ethereal monks of Andromeda, beings of such ancient wisdom that they remembered the formation of the first galactic government, shifted uneasily in their meditation spheres. The warrior clans of the Magellanic Clouds, who prided themselves on knowing every military threat in the galaxy, exchanged concerned glances through their neural links. "This is impossible," declared General Throckmore of the Centauri Defense Force, his forearms gesturing emphatically. "The Galactic Concordat requires every sapient species to have representation. We have contact protocols. We have first contact specialists. No world achieves spaceflight without our knowledge." But as the chamber's AI systems began pulling up detailed scans of the Sol system, a disturbing picture emerged. Earth showed clear signs of industrial civilization. Their radio emissions had been detected for over a century. Satellite networks orbited their planet. They had even achieved limited space travel. with small outposts on their planetary satellite and robotic explorers throughout their system. Yet somehow, impossibly, they had never made contact with the galactic community. Perhaps they are a non-technological species? Suggested the gentle ones of Proxima, beings who communicated through shifts in their bioluminescent skin patterns. Some worlds choose the path of harmony over advancement. The chamber's central AI, a collective consciousness formed from the greatest minds of 12 different species, processed the data in milliseconds. Its findings appeared as holographic text that floated above the delegates like judgment from the stars themselves. Negative, the AI announced. Species classification: Homo sapiens. Technology level: nuclear capable. Space travel: primitive, but functional. Estimated population: 8.1 billion individuals. Military capability: significant conventional and nuclear arsenals. Status: unknown to galactic community. The silence that followed was deafening. 8 billion individuals. In the galactic community, most species numbered in the millions, or low billions, by the time they achieved galactic recognition. The largest populations belonged to the hive minds and collective consciousnesses, where individual identity was subsumed into group thought. But 8 billion independent minds? 8 billion individuals who had somehow remained hidden from the most comprehensive surveillance network in the galaxy? There must be some kind of interference, muttered Ambassador Quell Nova of the Shapeshifter Collective, her form unconsciously shifting to mirror her anxiety. A natural phenomenon. A barrier. But the AI had already considered that possibility. No barriers detected. The Sol system shows no unusual phenomena that would prevent detection or contact. In fact, their radio signals have been received by 17 different galactic monitoring stations over the past century. Then why? Asked Ambassador Vex 9, his voice barely above a whisper. Has no one made contact? The chamber's AI paused, an unusual occurrence that sent worry through every digital consciousness present. When it finally responded, its words carried implications that would shake the foundation of galactic civilization. Analysis suggests the existence of a systematic protocol preventing first contact with Sol 3. Cross-referencing with classified databases reveals multiple instances where contact missions were planned, but subsequently cancelled. Reasons for cancellation are listed as pending further evaluation in all cases. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Representatives who had lived for centuries, who had witnessed the rise and fall of stellar empires, felt a chill that had nothing to do with physics. Who? Demanded General Throckmore, his hand instinctively moving toward his ceremonial weapon. Has the authority to prevent first contact without Senate approval? The AI's response was immediate and terrifying. The Galactic Council of Elders. Every being in the chamber knew that name. The Elders were the founding species, the ancient civilizations that had first formed the galactic community millions of years ago. Etha. The emergency session had stretched for 18 standard hours when the ancient doors of the Senate chamber began to resonate with a frequency that predated modern civilization. The massive crystalline portals, each weighing several thousand tons, moved for the first time in 3 millennia. Through the opening came beings that most delegates had only heard about in the oldest historical records. The Council of Elders arrived not as individuals, but as living embodiments of their species' evolutionary pinnacle. First came the Architect, the last surviving member of the civilization that had literally built the Galactic Senate complex. Its form was geometric perfection made flesh, angles and curves that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. Behind it glided the Gardener, whose species had seeded life on over 10,000 worlds before ascending beyond the need for physical form. The being appeared as a constantly shifting aurora of green and gold light. But it was the third figure that caused even the most ancient delegates to fall silent in recognition and fear. The Keeper of Memories walked on legs that had touched the surface of the galaxy's first inhabited world. Its eyes held the collective knowledge of every extinct civilization, every failed experiment in consciousness that had ever existed. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of geological time. "We had hoped this day would never come," the keeper said, its words bypassing all translation systems and speaking directly into the consciousness of every being present. "We had hoped that humanity would find another path." Ambassador Vex 9, his ceremonial authority feeling suddenly inadequate, stepped forward. "Honored elders, the Senate demands answers. We have discovered that an entire civilization has been hidden from galactic knowledge. This violates every principle upon which our community was founded." The architect's impossible geometry shifted, creating patterns that hurt to perceive directly. "You speak of principles as if they are absolute. But principles must sometimes yield to survival." General Throckmore, his warrior instincts overriding diplomatic protocol, slammed his four fists against his delegation's barrier. What threat could a pre-contact species possibly pose to the galactic community? They haven't even achieved faster than light travel. The gardener's aurora pulsed with what might have been amusement or sorrow. "Your question reveals the fundamental limitation of your perspective. You measure threat by technology, by military might, by the crude instruments of force. You do not understand the true nature of danger." The chamber's AI, driven by its programmed need for information, projected a holographic display of Earth into the space above the elders. The blue marble hung there, deceptively peaceful, its surface showing the swirling patterns of weather systems and the faint geometric traces of human civilization. "This world produces dangerous thinking," the keeper of memories stated with the finality of natural law. "Its inhabitants have developed concepts that could unravel the social fabric of every civilization in this chamber." Ambassador Zaraketh's cybernetic consciousness raced through thousands of possible interpretations. What concepts? Advanced physics? Quantum computing? Artificial intelligence beyond our understanding? Worse, the architect replied, its form shifting into configurations that suggested infinite recursion. "They have developed the concept of individual equality." Well, the statement hung in the air like a gravity well, warping the understanding of every being present. In the galactic community, hierarchy was natural, inevitable. The Zephyrian cloud beings served as living computers for their silicon masters. The Delphinian pod minds shared consciousness because individual thought was considered a form of mental illness. The hive queens ruled their workers not through force, but because the workers literally could not conceive of existence without guidance. "Every stable civilization requires order," the gardener explained, its aurora dimming to a barely perceptible glow. "Some individuals lead, others follow. Some species serve, others command. This is the natural way, the pattern that allows complex societies to function across the vastness of space. But humans," the keeper continued, "have somehow convinced themselves that every individual possesses identical, inherent value. They believe that a worker has the same fundamental worth as a leader, that the governed have the right to choose their governors, that any being can rise beyond the circumstances of their creation." General Throckmore's confusion was evident in the rapid flickering of his bioluminescent crest. "But surely this is merely a primitive philosophical phase? All species eventually mature beyond such naive concepts." "No," the architect stated with crystalline certainty. "Our observation teams have monitored human civilization for over 12,000 standard years. Instead of abandoning these concepts as they advanced, they have refined them, strengthened them, built their entire social structure around them. They have fought wars to defend the idea that individual consciousness is sacred. They have died, rather than surrender the belief that thinking beings should determine their own fate." The implications began to ripple through the chamber, like a cascade failure in a neural network. If humans truly believed that individual consciousness was inherently valuable, if they believed that every thinking being had the right to self-determination, then contact with the galactic community would be catastrophic. Ambassador Quell Nova's form had unconsciously shifted to mirror her growing understanding and horror. "They would see our civilization as a vast system of oppression, They would not understand our willing hierarchies, added the gentle ones of Proxima, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with distress. They would interpret our natural order as slavery. The ethereal monks, being so ancient that they had witnessed the birth of the first galactic government, spoke in unison through their shared consciousness. They would try to free us from social structures we choose to embrace. But Ambassador Vex 9, his large eyes reflecting the terrible clarity of the situation, asked the question that everyone had begun to fear. What happens when they achieve faster than light travel? What happens when they find us? The Keeper of Memories turned its ancient gaze toward the holographic Earth, and for the first time in eons, showed something approaching emotion. We have calculated 17,000 possible scenarios. In every single one, human contact with the galactic community results in the complete collapse of our civilization within 3 generations. The Chamber's AI, processing this information through its vast networks, began projecting probability matrices into the space above the delegates. The calculations were terrifyingly simple. Humans would encounter species that accepted servitude as natural and would immediately begin efforts to liberate them. They would refuse to acknowledge the authority of the Galactic Senate because they believed in the right of self-governance. They would spread their ideas like a virus, encouraging rebellion among species that had never conceived of rebellion as possible. But surely, Ambassador Zaraketh protested, her cybernetic logic circuit struggling with the implications. A single species cannot destabilize an entire galactic civilization. The gardener's aurora flared with bitter knowledge. You underestimate the power of an idea whose time has come. We have seen it happen before, on smaller scales. When the collective of Kepler 6-2 encountered a species that believed in individual freedom, their entire hive mind structure collapsed within 50 years. Billions of beings suddenly convinced they had the right to think independently. The result was not liberation, but chaos, suffering, and eventual extinction. General Throckmore's 4 hands clenched into fists. Then we stop them. We prevent them from achieving faster than light travel. We isolate their system. Impossible, the architect responded, its geometric form pulsing with calculated certainty. They are too adaptable, too inventive. Our projections show them achieving FTL capability within the next 50 to 100 standard years, regardless of any interference we might attempt. The debate that followed lasted for 72 standard hours, during which the greatest minds in galactic civilization wrestled with an impossible decision. The Chamber's AI had calculated and recalculated every possible scenario. But the mathematics remained stubbornly consistent. Humanity's core beliefs about individual worth and self-determination were fundamentally incompatible with the hierarchical structures that held galactic society together. It was Ambassador Vex 9 who finally broke the deadlock with a question that cut through millennia of assumed wisdom. Honored elders, in all your calculations, have you ever considered the possibility that our civilization is wrong? The Keeper of Memories turned its ancient gaze toward the young ambassador, and for the first time in eons, seemed to truly consider a new thought. Explain your meaning. For millions of years, we have built our society on the premise that hierarchy is natural, that some beings are meant to lead and others to follow. We have accepted this as the foundation of stability and progress. Vex 9's luminous eyes brightened as his conviction grew. But what if stability built on the suppression of individual will is not actually stable? What if it is merely the illusion of stability, maintained only until someone asks the right questions? End quote. What if it's merely Unsunder 40? End quote. General Throckmore's warrior instincts recoiled from the implication. You suggest we abandon the social order that has brought peace to the galaxy for millions of years? I suggest, Vex 9 replied carefully, that perhaps it has not brought peace to everyone. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Slowly, reluctantly, delegates began to examine their own societies through this new lens. The Delphinian pods realized they had never actually asked their individual members if they wanted to share consciousness. The gentle ones of Proxima had never questioned whether their bioluminescent servants truly chose their servitude or simply knew no alternative. The Zephyrian cloud beings had never considered that their silicon masters might not be inherently superior, merely different. Ambassador Zara Keth's cybernetic consciousness was already running social stability analyses on these new parameters. If we apply human concepts of individual equality to our current galactic structure, the results are indeed catastrophic. But if we apply those concepts to a theoretical restructured galactic civilization, the mathematics become far more complex. Meaning, asked the architect, it's impossible geometry shifting to accommodate new conceptual frameworks. Meaning that short-term chaos might lead to long-term stability that is actually sustainable rather than merely maintained through suppression of dissent, Zaraketh replied. The humans have somehow created stable societies based on individual freedom. Their civilization has not collapsed into chaos. Instead, it has proven remarkably adaptable and resilient. The gardener's aurora pulsed with reluctant recognition. They have survived planetary wars, climate changes, resource shortages, and technological disruptions that would have destroyed most species. They adapt, they innovate, they persist. Because, the ethereal monks spoke in their shared voice, when every individual has stake in the outcome, every individual contributes to the solution. The realization was spreading through the chamber like a wave. Species that had never questioned their social structures were suddenly seeing them from an entirely different perspective. The worker castes began to wonder what it would be like to choose their own paths. The servant species started to imagine making decisions for themselves. It was then that the Keeper of Memories did something unprecedented in galactic history. The ancient being laughed. The sound was not pleasant. It carried the weight of geological time, the bitterness of countless civilizations that had risen and fallen, while maintaining the same fundamental mistakes. But beneath the bitterness was something else: relief. For 3 million years, the Keeper said, we have maintained the lie that our way was the only way. We have suppressed species that showed signs of developing concepts of individual freedom. We have guided galactic evolution toward stability and order, convincing ourselves it was for the greater good. The architect's form shifted into new configurations, patterns that suggested possibility rather than inevitability. We have become gardeners who prune away any growth that does not fit our predetermined design. But humans, the gardener continued, its aurora brightening to levels not seen in millennia. Humans grew in the one place we could not prune. They developed in isolation, free from our guidance, and they chose a different path. General Throckmore, his 4 hands trembling with a combination of fear and anticipation, asked the question that would reshape galactic history. So, what do we do now? The answer came not from the elders, but from the chamber's AI, its collective consciousness finally freed to consider possibilities it had been programmed to ignore. We have a choice. We can continue to maintain a galactic civilization built on hierarchy and accept that it will eventually collapse when it encounters a more adaptive model. Or we can begin the process of transformation before we are forced into it. The humans are coming, Ambassador Vex 9 said with quiet certainty. Our monitoring stations show their technology advancing rapidly. They will achieve faster than light travel within decades, not centuries. When they find us, they will not ask permission to exist. They will not accept our explanations about natural order. They will simply be themselves, and by being themselves, they will force us to examine what we have become. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than anyone expected. 412 civilizations voted to begin immediate preparation for what historians would later call the Great Liberation. 388 chose to maintain the status quo and hope that humanity would somehow choose to limit its expansion. But even the narrow margin was enough. For the first time in galactic history, the Senate voted to fundamentally restructure galactic civilization, not in response to external threat, but in recognition of internal possibility. The process would take generations. Species would need to learn concepts they had never encountered. Social structures, millions of years old, would need to be carefully dismantled and rebuilt. There would be chaos, confusion, and undoubtedly some civilizations would not survive the transition. But as the first liberation protocols were transmitted across the galaxy, something unprecedented began to happen. Worker castes across hundreds of worlds began to imagine. Servant species started to dream. Individual consciousness, suppressed for millions of years, began to wake up. 3 years later, when the human starship Endurance made its first tentative journey beyond the Sol system, its crew was expecting to find empty space. Instead, they found a beacon left by the Galactic Senate, broadcasting a simple message in mathematical concepts that any spacefaring species would understand. Welcome to the galaxy. We have been waiting for you. We have much to learn from each other. Captain Sarah Chen, commander of humanity's first interstellar mission, stared at the translation with a mixture of wonder and confusion. They've been waiting for us? How did they even know we existed? Her science officer, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, was already analyzing the beacon's technical specifications. Captain, this technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. They've not just known about us, they've been watching us for a very long time. Then why didn't they make contact? Asked Navigator James O'Brien. Captain Chen smiled, thinking of humanity's long struggle for freedom, democracy, and individual rights. Maybe they weren't ready for us. As the Endurance set course for the coordinates included in the beacon's message, neither its crew nor the waiting galactic civilization fully understood what was about to unfold. Humanity was about to meet the galaxy, and the galaxy was about to meet itself. The universe had just become a much more interesting place. Then we have a choice, the Keeper of Memories said, its voice carrying the weight of inevitable tragedy. We can maintain our quarantine and hope that somehow they choose not to explore the galaxy. Or we can make first contact on our terms and attempt to manage the transformation that will follow. Or, General Throckmore said quietly, his warrior instincts suggesting a third option that no one wanted to voice. The silence that followed was absolute. 800 civilizations, some billions of years old, contemplated the possibility that their entire way of life would soon be challenged by a species that had never even left its own star system. A species that believed the unthinkable. That every conscious being, regardless of origin or design, deserved freedom. In the depths of space, monitoring stations continued their endless watch on the small blue world, where 8 billion humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that they had become the galaxy's greatest existential threat. I had retreated from day-to-day governance long ago, appearing only in the most dire circumstances. Their last known intervention had been during the Great Silence, when an entire star system had been quarantined after its inhabitants discovered something that had driven them to collective madness. Emergency session, declared Vex 9, his ceremonial authority giving weight to his words. I invoke Article 7 of the Galactic Concordat. All delegates will remain in session until this matter is resolved. As security fields activated around the chamber, and communication with the outside galaxy was temporarily severed, 800 civilizations prepared for answers they weren't sure they wanted to hear. In the depths of space, monitoring stations that had watched Earth for decades began transmitting urgent messages toward the galactic core, where ancient beings stirred from their long contemplation. The secret that had been kept for over a century was finally beginning to unravel. And with it, every assumption the galaxy had made about the nature of intelligence, civilization, and survival among the stars.